This is the first time I've been in Germany.
How do you like it?
It's fabulous. I'm actually amazed at Munich, how it's beautiful, it's clean, it's quiet, it's so picturesque, all of the buildings. There's beer everywhere. It's pretty much, it's amazing.
So where do you live in the US?
I live in DC, Washington, DC, yes.
How does that compare to Munich?
It's, well, you know, the area we're in, it's the capital of the United States. There's so many different cultures around it. I can't really put my finger on it. It has this one. Coming here, the city's a lot quieter. It's a lot quieter. But it's, you know, one of my favorite restaurants back home was a German restaurant, and kind of what you think of Germany and Bavaria, this obviously is the kind of quintessential Bavarian, someone said it's a 1 million person village, someone told me that. You know, it feels like that, so it's...
So what's your favorite German food then?
I like bratwurst and sauerkraut and pretzels and beer, so very traditional when it comes to that, yeah.
Speaking about Germany, there's a very large Elder Scrolls community in Germany.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you view that community from afar? Is it a very active community?
It is, and one that has been supportive of us for 20 years. You know, our games have done very, very well in Germany for a long time. So outside the United States, Germany is our largest fan base and market. And I think that also speaks to not just what we do, but the audience's taste for role-playing games and fantasy and games that try to do a little bit more, that offer you worlds to explore. And my sense from the bit I know about it and the Germans I've spoke with and interacted with over the years, that their view of gaming is, you know, gaming is an important part of their lives across the culture. If you go back to, you know, many of the great board games that we play in the office, they're from Germany, and so I think it's the type of games that we do and the audience here has been a very, very good match.
Speaking of the type of games and the audience here, especially in the German PC market, there's this ongoing fear of games becoming more casual and not challenging enough and going too much mainstream. And I would argue that Skyrim or Elder Scrolls is a very hardcore game in a market that actually goes towards casual games, that goes towards mainstream, and it still is very successful. Would you say that the hardcore part is what makes it so successful?
I think I've heard this conversation that you need to appeal to this audience or this audience, and I've always looked at gaming on this kind of spectrum where you have we'll call them casual, but very quick games you jump in for a few minutes and enjoy, and those games can be quite good. And then this middle thing, and then the games over here that are more involving, that assume you're going to be spending a lot of time sitting in front of the screen, and you're going to invest yourselves in them. And we'll always, you know, the gaming world kind of shifts and does like this, and we'll always be over here in the more hardcore area. But sometimes that moves with gaming, like our own tastes kind of move that. This is this game over here, even though it's not in our spectrum, is doing this to teach itself to you. And so, okay, well, you know, that's really nice, let's do that. We kind of take a very wide view of gaming. So, but if you do look at the spectrum, we end up on this more in-depth, hardcore area. And when people look at demographics, our view has been there are so many of these people. So you look at the large number of people that play even a Call of Duty or a FIFA, these, you know, tens of millions of video game fans. Those games are very different, but they're still investing a lot of time, right, playing those games. And so if you look at a Skyrim, they're willing to invest that time. And the game's going to reward that. The game's going to reward that with depth. The game's going to reward that with go explore. There's going to be something unique for you to find. And so I think that audience is large and growing. So I don't see us ever having to move out of that, what we like to do.
Speaking of investing all this time in games, I mean, open world games, games where you can spend a significant amount of time going exploring, going out, hundreds of hours. Do you think that's in some way reflective of maybe a shift in society nowadays, that people have this urge to flee to different places?
I don't think so. I've never thought of it that way. I think people have enjoyed games like that for a long time. I'm a fan of the Ultimas, that's what I kind of grew up on. And I think the games now, they can be more immersive and people want more out of them. I don't think they're trying to escape anything. I think that the way the games can make you feel when you're playing them is just more rewarding than they used to be.
About this whole open world aspect, I mean, the last time we spoke was, I think, shortly before Morrowind was released. And back then, open world RPGs were kind of like a hardcore segment in the gaming market. Nowadays, open world is all the rage, so to speak. So what would your theory be? Why is open world becoming so important and so popular in games nowadays?
I don't have a good answer for that, because that's what we've always done. So it's hard for me to say why, more people are doing it. Maybe games like ours or GTA are popular, so I think I can say what I think makes them great, which is the player gets to direct his own experience. That if you give the player enough tools, that's what's great about video games, right? That I can direct my own experience. I can decide when I want action and when I want downtime, and I'm going to go talk to this woman over there, or I want to crest a valley and see this moment, and I'm just going to stand here and watch the sunset. That's what video games do better than any other form of entertainment. So I think, we're taking advantage of that, and I'm starting, others want to as well. That's what's special about the medium.
Since you talked about the Call of Duties, if you take a look at game series nowadays, you have Call of Duty, which often gets kind of like complaints from fans that it gets too stale because they don't innovate enough. You have other type of games, if you look, for instance, at Dragon Age, where with every game they do something different. And then you have a game series like Elder Scrolls, where many of the core elements remain the same from the first or the second entry, like the Daedras, the crafting material, the types of armor, the types of weapons, all that kind of stuff. So how do you balance that out? How do you balance innovation while still keeping in touch with your core values?
What we try to do, we do try to make each game have its own tone and vibe, that it's its own thing. But we don't make sequels where we're just adding on to the last one. I think if you look at the spectrum of games we made, and I would include Fallout 3 in that, that we like to kind of start over and say, well, here's our ideal of, take the Elder Scrolls. It's going to be, an open world fantasy epic where you can be whoever you want to be and do what you want to do. Okay, what's the best way to present that? But we do have the history of the other games to kind of guide us. So even when we try things for a new game, we'll try something new, and if we don't like it, we can kind of drift back to some elements we did before. The world itself, the lore, the Daedra, the races, we do like to keep them the same. And we've added to each game, but not a ton, because we're mostly interested in, well, how do we present, if I'm a fan of the Elder Scrolls and this is the world, a lot of time has gone by since the last game, for better or worse. There's like 3, sometimes 6 years in between them. How do we present that again? Because it's going to be new for everybody. And so, in some respects, we want to make the game that makes you feel the same way. You said you were a fan of Daggerfall, right? Yes, so the way you felt when you played Daggerfall, that's the way we want you to feel again, but with Oblivion or Skyrim or Morrowind for that time period. And then time goes on, and the technology changes, you've changed, we've changed. But that someone who picked up Skyrim, if it's their first Elder Scrolls game, the feeling they had when they put in the disc and stepped out into the world, it's the same one you had if you played Arena for the first time or Daggerfall for the first time. And so it's really kind of that vibe, that mode of like, this is me in the world and it's all for me. That really is the element that we go back to, whether or not crafting works this way or combat works this way. Those are secondary to the world and the flow of playing the game.
You're here in Germany because of the Lara Awards tonight. You're in your 40s and already getting a Lifetime Achievement Award.
That's a little weird, yeah.
Doesn't that...
It's weird.
Does that make you feel kind of old or anything?
It's the first time I thought that way, I'll admit it. You kind of think, oh, we're going along and making our games, and something like this comes along, which is, it's wonderful. You take a step back. But it's not just me, I think it's the whole studio. I kind of represent everybody. It's a privilege of mine to be in charge of a group like that. And so it's kind of for everybody, and we do take a step back and say, well, are we done? Is that, but it kind of makes you feel like, all right, well, let's keep, maybe in another 20 years, they'll give it to us again. Let's keep going, let's do it again. Because the games come out and people play those, and we love that it gives people enjoyment, but we do it because, we're coming to the office every day for 3 years and 4 years. This is like, I've spent more time with Elder Scrolls than I have anything in my life. 20 years on something, so they become a part of you in a way that is very different. And so Fallout as well, I've worked on for a very, very long time. And you're not ready to say, okay, Lifetime Achievement.
Not ready to call it quits.
Absolutely not, no. Our best stuff is ahead of us, no doubt, no doubt.
When you take a step back and look back, like you just mentioned, is there a game that you worked on that you would say still has the fondest place in your heart? That's kind of like the game I'm most proud of. Is there something that stands out?
I love them all, a bit the same. Maybe it's recency. It's because it's usually, I always work my way backwards because Skyrim was the most recent and Fallout 3. I think both of those, they're two unique situations. But Skyrim's success both on a critical level and then commercially, you would never, both of those things together, it just doesn't happen. It feels like one of those once in a lifetime kind of things. Fallout 3 for us, because we've been doing Elder Scrolls for so long, and we were able to work on Fallout and kind of reboot it, even though we hadn't created it, and bringing our own flavor to it. And people, the reception of that was so warm, and people really took to it. That was very, very rewarding because we hadn't created it. I think both of those games, they're the two most recent ones. I probably worked my way backwards. Oblivion for its reasons. Morrowind often because the company went through some very hard times. They were very, very close to going out of business in the late 90s.
Daggerfall didn't sell well?
Daggerfall did fine, and then we spread ourselves thin. We started doing a lot of games, and they just weren't good enough. And they weren't the kind of games we should have been making at the time. We did Battlespire. I did Redguard, a game I love. But it didn't do well for the company. And we had been working on the 10th Planet, and there were other projects no one heard about. So there was this period, Daggerfall was 96, maybe to 2000. We went through some very rough times. And that was when Bethesda became where ZeniMax Media was founded, and Bethesda became part of ZeniMax. And that gave us kind of a new lease on life, really. And we went into Morrowind. There were six of us at the time, right? The studio had gotten that small, and I was in charge of Morrowind. But by that time, once you get to that point, there was this element of no fear. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? We could go out of business. Well, let's go all in. This is the game. Let's put all our chips on the table. This is the game people want from us. This is the game we want to do. And there was kind of this, I think a lot of times you make a game, maybe you're a little afraid, or how are people going to like this, or let's only do this, maybe we'll make money. But we were, all right, we're going to do it all. And that was kind of the new genesis of Bethesda. I think you can trace back to that. The stuff we're doing now, there's still bits of code in what we do now that was in Morrowind. So that game is special from that standpoint, I think, for all of us.
Was Morrowind also the game that kind of enabled the publishing arm of Bethesda? Because I think I remember Morrowind was published by Ubisoft, at least in Germany, wasn't it?
It was by Ubisoft in Germany. We had always published our own stuff in the US. And then we used Ubisoft for Morrowind. We had used Virgin before that. And now we have our own offices everywhere. So Fallout 3 was, I believe, the first one we published ourselves in the UK. Ubisoft may have done Fallout 3, I forget, in Germany. Yes. You probably, yes? And then, since Skyrim, we do it ourselves everywhere, which is, we do a lot better just because, our own folks, and they're fabulous over here, that they can give it the attention it needs. And they also kind of tell us about, the German market and what's important, and the rating system is always comes up, and what's good and what's bad and what we can do and how we maneuver that. So it's great having our own. I kind of view us as the largest independent publisher because we're not a public company. Mm-hmm. So we get to make the game we want, and then we can publish it everywhere in the world. It's great.
I want to talk to you about 2 quotes that I read about that you, I think, said at the DICE Summit in 2009. One of them is, "Great games are played, not made." Can you elaborate a bit about that design philosophy?
That is kind of our mantra in the office. We have had that for, I think I coined it during Morrowind. And that is, you can kind of write these, I think when you're developing technology, that if the technology isn't ready, you write these very large design documents. This is everything the game is going to do. And then you get too attached to that. It's much better just to start putting things in, see what works. So we'll spec out our worlds. We'll have a very good design for the world and the people because it's all interacts. But when it comes to the actual flavor of something, like Dragons in Skyrim was a one-pager. This is how they feel. They feel like a mix of Big Daddies from BioShock and helicopters from Half-Life 2 and these dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, and this is how they should feel on the screen. And let's start with this, and then we'll go to this and this and this. And it became, those are the best features in a game. If you get too attached to what you've written down, you kind of end up in paths that aren't the best use of your time or the most fun game.
So you've got to be ready to kill your babies.
We do it often. So we'll do work and we want to put it in the game and play it as soon as possible. We have this, when we're developing, we have this time period we call opportunity time. And that's when you make your game the best. The more time you can give yourself to look at something and say, okay, but what are the real opportunities here? What should we spend the most time on? That's going to flesh out that feature more so than, well, here's the blueprint, dot, 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 dot.
I find that design philosophy quite interesting because it goes a bit against the trend of all the crowdfunding and Kickstarters where they really put out the concepts to their backers and in their original pitch, and then they have to stick to what they promised.
Yeah, that's probably a little different because they're asking for money. Mm-hmm. I would imagine a lot of them, though, still they're probably going to cast a very broad, this feature, but and if they involve the community in that, if they say, hey, we put this in, this is not working, I think as long as, in their situation, as long as there's a dialogue, they'll be fine.
The other quote I want to talk to you about is this. If install base really mattered, we'd all make board games because there are a lot of tables.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a bit on that?
It's kind of a funny saying that I would use it in the office again because people would say, oh, we should really focus on this platform. We should make something for this because a lot of people have it. And I would say, a lot of people have tables. Should we make board games? You're like, no. And it really is that you can find success anywhere. If we make our games and now for very high-end platforms. So now we're focused on next gen and PC, but someone may say, oh, you should support this one down here. It's got a big install base. Well, we'd have to change the game to support that, so we're going to stay over here. Or if someone is making, a game that is very, very good for a specific device, if they really make it for that and make it special, that they'll find success, even if the audience for that isn't the largest compared to something else.
I find that quote interesting in the PC context, especially because we're PC magazine, so a lot of our readers are kind of concerned that PC is slowly fading out, with consoles overtaking PC sales by a lot, or at least in the retail market. So do you look at PC as a platform in terms of installed base, in terms of sales, or is that something that you will always support?
But you could say that trend, for a while. Mm-hmm. If you were to take the last 10 years, it's kind of the same trend. But then with Skyrim, we did 2 to 3 times better on the PC than we've ever done, right? Because that's a game with mods and stuff. That is the PC is the best place to play that game. That kind of proves the point, right? So I would never look at those charts. No, our games in the future will be on PC and we'll take advantage of it because it can do amazing things.
Are next-gen platforms actually an asset for the PC in terms that now you can stretch the boundaries of the old generation?
Yes. The new systems, the main thing that they really have, and let's talk about processing power and all of those things. Mostly that's going to drive graphics, but the amount of memory makes a huge difference for the kind of games that we make. So now that you're getting into 8 gigs and so forth, we can start doing things that we would maybe only want to do on the PC for how we...
Can you name an example or maybe even a hypothetical example?
I wouldn't want to at this stage, but you can think about our games and how we want to store it and stream it. And if we want to think about characters on the other side of the world, we can just think about a lot more stuff at once if it's in memory, even if it's not on the screen. Or if you're wandering by a tavern, you play a lot of Skyrim, right? So you go, or any of our stuff, you go by a building, it's clear we haven't loaded what's in the building till you hit the door and you wait. Well, we can load it. If we have enough memory, we could load it right when you're near, like it's already loaded. We could have the sounds from the inside come out. Having that kind of memory, much more of a PC type architecture, that's kind of in our blood that would allow us to do.
For the end of the interview, I do need to address a bit of the elephant in the room, obviously. Can you talk a wee bit about what you're currently working on?
Well, we get asked a lot. I sort of tell people, like, we're figuring things out. We're taking our time. It's looking, we're extremely excited about it. And the reason we're kind of holding back right now is we want to wait till it's really there to show it to everybody. We don't want to kind of dribble it out. We'd rather say, surprise, boom, here it is. And make sure that, I think that moment of learning about something and seeing it for the first time is really, I enjoy those moments for other games, so we'd rather hold back and wait and just surprise everybody with.
Even if you have to live with all this fake stuff that's going on?
We're used to that stuff over the years. Our fans are awesome. So when they're not making mods, they're making fake announcements. So I think everybody gets it, they know, and they're willing to give us the time. And hopefully they'll love what we're working on.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's great seeing you again. It's been so long.